Welcome to the Financial Freedom Secrets Show. This is your host, Jackson Milan, the Wealth Mentor, helping business owners create financial freedom faster by mastering the language of money. Want to see how well you're tracking towards financial freedom? Complete our 40-point financial performance scorecard at wealthhealthcheck.com.au. That's wealthhealthcheck.com.au. The average score for most business owners is 18 out of 40. So complete the scorecard now and see how well you're tracking towards financial freedom.
G'day guys, this is Jackson Milan, the Wealth Mentor, and we're here for another episode of Financial Freedom Secrets podcast. I've got some good friends of mine and some amazing experts that have been helping trade businesses grow and scale so they can actually build more wealth. So I've got Waz and Nick here from Tradies in Business. How are you guys doing?
Hey Jackson, thank you. Very well. How are you?
I'm doing very well myself.
Howdy, howdy. I'm being very polite and letting Nick go first for a change.
Very gentlemanly of you.
Because I usually talk over the top of her, and I'm a terrible co-host on our own podcast and talk over the top of her at the start of just about every episode, Jackson.
I completely understand. Myself and my business partner are normally exactly the same, so I get it completely. So, guys, for those of the listeners and watchers who don't know who you are, give us who you are and what you do in a nutshell.
Who are we? That's a really good question. We're very complicated beings. No, we're not. We're really quite simple. I'm Nick or Coxie or Nicole, or I have 1,000 different names. Co-creator of Tradies in Business. I'm also a builder's wife. I have a construction company. I'm a mum to 5. But most importantly, I'm really passionate about helping tradies, I guess, prevent some of the pitfalls that we see so frequently. Jackson, very similar to some of the pitfalls you would see when you're talking to your clients. Most of those are around cash and flow and not enough of either. And so we do work quite a lot with tradies around, I guess, getting the systems and the structure in place in their business to help them find that freedom that so many of us go into business looking for in the first place.
Beautiful.
I am Waz. You can spell that however you like. It's mainly because most people can't spell my first name, which is Warrick. I'm the son of a carpenter, come from a long line of blue-collar tradespeople. Wanted to do the same when I was a young bloke. I hated school. I was actually really good at school because I was the smallest kid in school. I got picked on a fair bit, so I spent lots of time in the library and in the study books to get away from the bullies and just had a natural aptitude for learning. So did pretty well at school. My dad wouldn't have a bar of me joining him on the tools or getting a trade because his experience had been gut busting, not much cash flow, actually none, and just literally living hand to mouth as a tradesperson. So he figured the best way to save me from that was to encourage me to go to university and study accounting of all things. So absolutely hated that. Worst 3 years of my life. But I graduated and promptly went and got a job working for a building supplies company as a commercial accountant. Lasted 15 months in that and just got completely sick of it, and went and took a job as a sales rep with another building supplies company, repping to builders and developers. And I've kind of always had a passion for the trade industries, what I love to do in my spare time. And I suppose I'm fortunate given that I do have that trade background. I studied business. I had a financial planning business as well for about 8 years. So I got a great insight into the wealth creation side of things that I know we'll talk about today, and have been coaching for 14 years. Unfortunately, met up with Nick about 5 years ago and decided to let her do it with me. I'm really passionate about helping trade business owners change their thinking. My dad's outdated thinking and beliefs really hamstrung him and stopped him from actually generating the wealth that I know he wanted to. And I'm taking much more time than Nicole did, so I'm just going to go with it. But I do remember it was really gut-wrenching for me as a 30-something-year-old dad myself. And my dad got pretty ill towards the end of his life, and he shared this quite rare, heartfelt moment with me, and he was literally in tears as he told me that he regretted not giving a better life to myself, my brother, and my mother as the only breadwinner for our family. And it just gives me goosebumps just sharing that now. I can still see him sitting there just looking at me with this pain in his eyes and this awful regret about what he hadn't been able to do. And I suppose that is a big thing that drives me in what I do with Coxie here every day with Tradies in Business.
Wow. Every time we talk, guys, we've got more in common every time. I think there's so many synergies between our respective stories. It's not funny. And look, I think this is the common experience for most tradies. Like I come from tradies as well. My parents were. My dad actually had the same thing. I tried to drop out of school and get a job when he was working in the oil and gas industry, and he was making really good money in the shutdowns. And I tried to get a job with him as a tradies assistant, and he goes, "Nah, he wouldn't even let me buy the boots." And it was his way of steering me away from it. But you're right. I think there's so much guilt, there's so much good work ethic, but not a lot of income and wealth, of course, tied to the trade space. Why do you think that is, guys? Like observing your own respective parents, observing your clients, your own experiences. Why is this disconnect between such a great industry or industries that can make a lot of money, but why don't they?
That's a great question. For me, my experience very much has been that they don't know what they don't know. So they don't understand the untapped potential within their businesses. And so we tend to base our pricing on things like what the guy down the road's charging, or on what I've got to do to win that job, because I can't go without the work. Nothing else will come in the door. So it's fear, I guess. At the end of the day, it's fear. It's not knowing what they don't know. And fear really gets in the way and prevents them from, I guess, making some of those harder decisions that lead to fostering the kind of business that's going to create the wealth that they actually went into business for. And I think most business owners go into it for two things: to make great money that we have some control over, and to create fantastic lifestyles. I think the other problem here is we turn into slaves to our business, or the machine of our business, and then we miss out on the lifestyle as well. So very much we take that choice away from ourselves just through fear.
Definitely a lot of that from my perspective as well, Jackson. And I think, look, there's 1,000 reasons why people don't get the results that they want. And we've probably all seen 999 of them in ourselves as well, the three of us sitting here in our ivory tower. I know with the work that I've done in the last, 10 plus years, and from my own family background, a lot of the time I feel like people just get into this automatic duplication of what came before them. I think are very blessed, the three of us, that we found some awareness either through a mentor or a family member who opened our eyes, or perhaps we had a catastrophic learning with money. And actually, I hate this term these days, but, we woke up, we opened our eyes and went, holy dooly, maybe there is a different way of doing this. And unfortunately, I don't think a lot of people have that. They don't open their eyes to the fact that things could be different to their father and their mother and sister and auntie and everyone else that has always worked hard for a living. And I feel like it's still this perpetuation from whether it's the industrial age or whatever, who knows, but there's still this really persistent idea that unless you work hard for it, it's not honest, it's not deserved. And that is such broken thinking. They just don't educate themselves. I think it's a big set of limiting beliefs that business owners and particularly tradespeople have, is that Nick and I hear this all the time. I'm just a plumber. I'm just a landscaper. I'm just a brickie. I'm no good with numbers. And they repeat these things like a mantra, and it keeps them in that same limiting thinking about what they're capable of. And I got to say, and no disrespect to any other industry or profession, and I've worked, I've sat on national boards here in Australia with financial planning groups and all sorts of stuff, and hung out with some supposedly really bright people. And some of the smartest people I know are tradespeople. The mental arithmetic and problem solving that they can do on site, in a heartbeat, under pressure, it just impresses me every single day. And I love hanging out with tradespeople for that reason, because they're such brilliant problem solvers and they're such creative people. And this goes for tradie wives as well. I mean, the stuff that our husband and wife teams are doing is amazing. So I just think they don't understand the skill set that they've actually got and how to apply it.
I agree with that completely. I must say my observation has been over the years that tradies often endure the pain for far longer than any other industry. And they just, because of that hard work ethic, they tend to just try and grind their way through their problems. But the great thing about that, because it is a little bit of a double-edged sword, it obviously takes them longer to go and seek help. But once they make that commitment, like they're all in, it's like it goes from 0 to 100. Is that your experience that you've seen through working with your clients as well?
Absolutely.
you're absolutely right. It takes some time for them to put their hand up and say, I'm ready. Because that requires us to be vulnerable and admit that we don't know what we don't know. That's really tough to do. But when they do and when they're ready, and typically it's one part of the partnership or the other that seeks the help, and then we have to work with the other part of the partnership to make them feel comfortable enough to be that vulnerable. But when they do, man, they get some great results really quickly because they're of that brain that they have, the analytical brain, the opportunity to take that information and really create something with it, rather than, I think many of us still get a little bamboozled or a little bit overwhelmed with so much information. These guys have a great ability to switch the way they think and really take that information and implement it immediately to have that huge change really quickly.
I love that. Fantastic.
Application of knowledge, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's the thing. Good idea in theory remains exactly that, just a good idea until you put it into place. And it's that fierce execution is what makes the biggest difference. But in my experience, I've noticed that for a lot of tradespeople, one of the biggest things that they're really fearful of doing is working with their pricing, charging more. Like how I've observed it is that they get started in their business, they're charging like the sole trader, owner-operator rate. And then when they start bolting on team and premises and more vehicles and all of these things, it doesn't always adjust proportionately to the extra responsibilities they're taking on. So talk to us a little bit about pricing psychology for tradies. What's been your insights and experiences around this, and how do we solve it?
That's a big rabbit hole you just pushed us into, mate. And I'm shocking at giving short, succinct answers at the best of time, Jackson. So this will be a huge challenge for me.
Dive straight in, mate. We've got plenty of time.
I think it's what Nick said before, actually. I'll go back to talking about, the broad, why don't trade business owners get better results or make the change? And I think it's fear. There is such a cultural paradigm within the trades of doing it cheaper to win the work. When it comes to discounting, other than retail, particularly white goods, I think the trades has one of the worst cases of discountitis that I've ever seen in more than 14 years of coaching small businesses around Australia and New Zealand. So I think because of that could be two things. We could say, oh, well, it's just how the industry does it. And that's what Nick and I talk about as being below the line. That's the victim approach to it. The flip side of that is you don't actually have to do it that way. And it's amazing. It does literally bring tears to my eyes when I hear the stories from our clients of how they've gone and just tested it and they've raised their rates on a particular service, or they've just given it a little tickle up of, just 3%. And the amazement from them of no one said a thing. In fact, we had this really great customer that said, oh my gosh, I've always thought you guys were too cheap. And I feel equally as gutted as I do excited for that business owner, because how much money have you missed out on in the last 7 years?
Exactly.
So I think a lot of it is just fear, and it's probably multifacets to that. And I will let Nick speak to that point as well. Obviously, there's the much talked about one by business coaches and finance people. There's the fear of losing customers or fear of not winning business. But I think there's other fears that come into that around raising rates as well that don't get talked about a lot. And I know Nick's going to manage to talk about that, even though she has no idea what I'm dropping her into here.
No, I'm sure you're all over it, Nick.
This is the way we work, is it not?
I love
that. Drop me in a hole and I'll swim. Look, it's imposter syndrome. What we actually see a huge amount of is imposter syndrome. And it still blows my mind to think that tradies that are so darn good at what they do don't back themselves enough to actually understand their worth or the worth of the solution that they're providing. So I think there's a lot of that we see. And I guess, again, it comes back to not knowing what you don't know and not understanding how to make some tweaks in your business so you're not competing on price anymore. You're actually providing a solution and you're winning out on solution rather than price. But I also feel like with tradies, when they are in pain, and you can't see my air quotes, but when they're in pain, like they're feeling a lot of pain at the moment around the fuel increases. And 3 months ago, they were feeling a lot of pain about labour shortages and the rates that was creating a change in. And then before that, it was material changes. And around those times, they tend to be okay with an enormous amount of pressure and pain to look at shifting their pricing. But they're still not looking at the whole picture. It takes quite a bit to then look at the whole picture. So for me, it's probably a couple of things. It's fear. And the fear is coming a lot from not backing themselves, that imposter syndrome. But it's also something that they don't feel motivated to do much about until they're feeling enormous pressure and pain, which is dreadfully sad to think that they've got to be in that position of huge pressure, huge pain, uncomfortable conversations, friction in the household, friction at work, friction with clients, before they'll even consider raising their rates a small amount to cope with some diabolical situations that we're seeing out there in the marketplace at the moment.
Yeah, it's crazy. We've spoken about this before. I've definitely struggled with imposter syndrome. I think we all do to a degree. What was interesting, one of my friends said to me, he said, Jackson, imposters don't feel imposter syndrome. And I'm like, oh, okay, I get it. And the penny kind of dropped for me. But you're right. And it's that scarcity-based mentality. And I think it's also the battler label that I think tradies have, right? Because like I remember my parents always referring to themselves as Aussie battlers. And back on what you were saying was our words have power. And when we give ourselves a label and we repeat that label, that's what we become. And our words can be weapons in that respect. So when we call ourselves Aussie battlers, then what do we become? We're just constantly battling. And I don't know about you guys, but battling's a lot of hard bloody work. I prefer not to battle every day of my life, right?
Absolutely.
That's right. My dad definitely.
I think there's some really good insights there. So I guess you spoke a little bit about a 3% price increase. Is that where we start? We just make an adjustment, see what impact it has. Like, what's the next best step that a tradie listening to this can take to push the pace in that respect and get themselves a little bit out of that comfort zone?
I think they just got to start. I think you've nailed it with, whether it's 3%, 5%, 10%, most people aren't going to notice that small increase as a starting point to start to push alongside that fear. I don't believe you can push through fear. I think it's leaning into it essentially. And I think starting with a small price increase is a great place to start. But then they need to go back and get educated about they need to be charging to create that profit and wealth within their business. So getting really clear on what their break-even point is essential for them to understand what their business needs to charge, because their business is unique and individual to them and the way they've structured it. And there's definitely opportunity to make changes within that so they can get where they would like to be. But if they don't understand that basic knowledge first, they could be undercharging at every corner, even with a 10% increase. Yeah. So we need to get back to that basic of understanding, well, what do I need in my business for it to create that successful outcome that I'm looking for? But please start with something, go with 10%, if nothing else.
I love that.
And also backing that up with, and Nick spoke to this earlier, and I'm sure we'll get into goal setting and the power of that based off this. And the price versus value thing, I know it gets talked about all of the time, and it's a bit of a throwaway concept when it comes to coaching and mentoring. I think as business owners, we see the price of what we're providing somebody, but we don't fully understand the value to the other person. We don't always see it from the other person's perspective, being the customer. And customers all have different levels of value they place on getting their toilet unblocked. For someone, it might be worth $100. For someone else, that might be priceless. That might be worth 10 grand if they've got all the family coming in a week's time and they don't want to, have to clean the house out or whatever. So that whole value equation, I think it's to build out processes within your business, and they don't have to be overly complicated or time consuming. Simple sales processes, just changing language, as you keep talking about, Jackson, which is a cracker. Our words have power. The way we talk about the services that we provide, and even just calling it a proposal instead of a quote, simple stuff like that changes the way I think about my plumbing services, and that's going to change the way my clients actually perceive what I'm supplying and therefore likely value it more. So we get away from just an auction and actually turn it into a problem-solving exercise for somebody.
I love that. It's super, super valuable. And I think it comes down to because we take this stuff for granted. Like when you're an expert technician, you're doing what you do every day, the magic kind of falls out of it a little bit and you kind of become desensitized to it. And even through my own experience at our farm, I've had a couple of tradies come out. Getting tradies to come out to us is a challenge in itself. But I've tried to take the time to understand the experience that they provide. And the best experience, the one that I was more than happy to pay that premium for, where they've taken me through a process. They've actually taken the time to educate me along the way. They've explained what they're doing, so there's no surprises. And they've had a no BS approach to providing the solution and then giving me a price for it. And better yet, they also even sent me an invoice to charge me for it. Because funnily enough, I've had a couple of tradies come out that haven't even sent the invoice yet, which is probably another challenge that we can talk about.
Oh, yeah.
And I think it's just that. It's just people want an experience. And people don't know what they don't know. So if the only thing that they're measuring your success by is the quote or the price that you're charging, then what do they compare that to?
It's so true. The power of a sales process should not be underestimated. It's such a, I guess, simple idea to play with. It's not easy to put in place. It's not an overnight success story, but it does create amazing results, again, to sell on that value point or the solution rather than getting stuck on price, because most people are going to get a couple of quotes from tradies if they can get them out to the house. And if they actually get those quotes back, they will be looking at the bottom dollar, and what they will be comparing over time will be what solution feels right for me and my family. And that's going to, if we can connect with that emotion, and you can do that really simply with an automated sales process, it doesn't need to be something clunky that you do every time. You can automate all of this at low or no cost. And with that automation reference, Jackson, you're educating the client so they know what to expect from your experience. They know what you're actually doing while you're out there, because for many of us lay people, we don't understand what's going on behind the wall or what you need to do the electrical check to put a new light switch in or something similar. Or we don't know what's actually going on with my toilet that needs unblocking. So with some good education, we start to understand what the value of what you're coming out to do at the home is. And if we don't capture that and we don't educate them, we give them space to think for themselves. And an uneducated person is a very dangerous one. And so they start to make some assumptions, right? And those assumptions generally lead us to think, well, the cheapest price is the best price in this case.
Yeah.
So if you've done the work with the sales process, and the work with the sales process, just that initial work setting it up, it will carry you through and help you get the better results with the right kind of clients. I think that's another thing we don't talk enough about. There's a lot of tire kickers out there. There's a lot of people just shopping for prices. A good sales process will help eliminate a lot of those along the way. It's a great secret tool that really helps to get the conversion that you're looking for. Again, that leads to that wealth growth that you're looking for out of the business.
That's phenomenal, because I think the big part, and I know from speaking to tradies, they don't want to be seen as salespeople. I think all of us have had bad experience with like sleazy salespeople over the years. And that's the persona, that's the thing that we see when we think about sales. But good sales should not be that way. And what you've described is it's a value-based process, right? We're taking them through and helping them make the best possible decision. And the great thing is when you're a tradie and you're an expert, you've got all of this amazing knowledge that you can impart on your client, which by the sounds of things, that becomes the sales process, right?
A lot of tradies or trade business owners get frustrated with customers who choose the lowest price provider, and yet they're not willing to do some education to teach those largely unsuspecting consumers.
Yeah.
That is not a very good way to choose your tradie. Here's a better way. And it goes back to everything we've said about we don't know what we don't know. So as the service provider, as the trade business owner, there is a huge opportunity to teach people some things, teach consumers some things, and actually, it sounds a bit grandiose, but start to influence the entire market, influence the perception of tradies. Unfortunately, I think people throw their hands in the air and go, oh, it's consumers. We get into that victim state where we blame the customers for what's befalling us, when in fact, we're not putting the effort in to teach them about plumbing and what goes into actually, extending your house or putting a deck on. We don't just come out and throw some sticks in the ground and chuck a bit of timber on top. Here's what's involved. And time and again, we hear stories where consumers are like, wow, I had no idea there was so much involved in that.
Yeah.
You guys are awesome. No one else has explained this to us. We're going to choose you. And guess what? You're the dearest. We hear that so often from our clients, and that's so gratifying for us. But that, when you talk about wealth creation, that just got that trade business owner a better quality client at a better margin, which means they've got more cash flow to do some other cool stuff with.
And that's the dream. That's what we should be chasing. So we've got a trade business that's implemented these things, right? They understand their cost to serve. They're charging the right price. They've got a sales process that gets them the right clients and repels the wrong ones. And they typically find themselves in a position where they've got that surplus cash, but they're probably stuck in that trading at time for money, and they want to start taking on staff. And this is where we see a lot of tradespeople complaining, because they're like, if I want something done right, I've got to do it myself. I'm sure you guys hear that all the time, right?
I think I say that sometimes, Jackson.
So what do we do to make sure that if we are starting to scale a team in a trade business, that we get it right and we can make sure that we've got consistency of that high quality standard, high quality service, and high quality profits all at the same time?
Oh, look, the magical word is systems, of course, systems and processes. And we got an email from one of our community recently, and I think he typed systems and processes about 6 times because he's in that phase at the moment where had a couple of employees, they were good guys in inverted commas. Unfortunately, they moved on and he's feeling a bit personally jilted by that. And so I think there's a frustration when it comes to systems and procedures and processes and all that stuff, that why do I need to give someone a how-to manual to do the job that they're supposed to be qualified to do, that I'm paying them big money to do these days, and yet I've still got to give them the how-to manual? What's with that? And I get the frustration. I mean, we have the same thing within our own business. You know, we're developing processes for people who should already know how to do that. And that's not really the point. The point is, I think, especially these days, is like business resilience. There's high staff turnover. It's a competitive wage market these days. People can get crazy money doing all sorts of unskilled work. And so skilled labor, we're having to pay more and more and more to attract the right people. And so it's inevitable, I think, that you're going to have a much shorter lifespan with your employees. So if I go back to, you know, some of my dad's limiting thinking, he never managed to wrap his head around any of these changes to the industry. And you know, he was a dinosaur by the time we sort of hit the internet age and, you know, social media and everything. He just couldn't understand any of it and didn't want a bar of it. I think not accepting that the landscape has shifted is going to keep us with the results that we were getting before. So we've got to accept that people don't stay for 10 years in a job anymore. And if they do, hallelujah, that's amazing, you know, like cherish that. But if you get 12 months out of someone these days, you're doing pretty well. So you need to build a business that can have people come through easily, smoothly. Getting people onboarded is much less stressful and time consuming. They're the systems, well, I guess they're the systems you need to build, but that's what systems and processes really allow you to do, is become look, in some sense, it's a bit of adult daycare that people joke about, you know. Next year, there'll be a whole bunch of new faces. You know, you think about school teachers. They go through this every year. And I think if we approach our business like that, it's like, well, people can come and go. That's okay. So long as they follow the process and they generate these results, they can hang around for 6 or 12 months. And after that, it's good. It was fun. I'll go find someone new.
Yeah, it takes the sting out of that hiring, right?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
It's a sticky situation. And I think that, you know, the last couple of years have really given us the opportunity to rethink the way we do business. And this is one of those critical areas that we need to start to rethinking, particularly in the trades where we have these astronomical starting rates even that people are looking for. I've got apprentices looking for massive pay increases because they're talking to the other guy at the pub who's earning a huge amount of money as a casual labourer doing something with the supermarket. So that's all very relative to them in their day-to-day life. It really is that HR system. So talking to them frequently, giving them feedback, giving them a growth plan so they can understand they're not going to be stagnant and stuck in this one position for a long time. Those key elements really create that sense of security for someone, because we might initially be attracted by a high wage, but it's the conditions around our employment that keep us steadfast. It's just like a customer. We might look for a good rate in the beginning, but it's the conditions and the comfort around our job that keep us where we are. So we want to create that value solution for our employees around what might work for them. So it's getting to know them and understanding what plans and goals they have, not just what our business has, but what they have, and how can I assist that team member to get where they want to go, because it might create a really sticky employee that doesn't actually want to leave because they can see their path to get to their own business ownership in some period of time. But that might buy you 3 to 5 years that you wouldn't have had otherwise. They might be thinking they can run out and do it in 12 months and put themselves in trouble. And also it doesn't reflect real well on you if they've left you as the last employer. So you can create this system. Yes, we talk about it a lot, but with a great system that, again, isn't hard to do. Once it's in place, it's easy to regularly work through. That will help your employees want to stick around rather than move on.
That's been put brilliantly, because I think you're right. Like in these businesses, if we've got these kind of self-limiting beliefs that these people are punters and they've got to be babied and then they're never going to be as good as me, it's got this negative energy that goes into these relationships. And why are they ever going to reciprocate when you see them as just a tool for the production of money? You know, I think the other big misconception is that a lot of these team members think that the business owner is money bags.
Yes.
They're rolling it.
Yeah, and like this is the thing, like the biggest enemy of relationships and the biggest destroyer of relationships is unmet expectations. So when there's a misalignment of expectations and understanding, then it's going to foster bad blood. So I think you hit the nail on the head, and I do this in my own business, talking to my team members, saying, hey, look, I know that this is a stepping stone for you. And whether that stepping stone, you're going to stay here for a year or 5 years or whatever that may be, I want to make sure that it's the best stepping stone that sets you up for the next jump that you're going to make, whether that be into your own business or another step in your career. Now, it's about investing in that human capital, because it's much like when we talk about money and investing, you want to make that work for you, but your people on your team is capital too. And you need to invest in that as much as you do your bands and your stock and everything. And if anything, you need to invest more into it. So I think this is music to my ears, and I wish more tradespeople did this kind of thing.
And you can't scale a trade business without employees or subcontractors, but you need that human capital. You know, there's two things you can leverage: other people's time and other people's money.
Yeah.
And so the money stuff, you know, that's probably easier. Leveraging other people's time, I think, is a bit of a mystery to a lot of trade business owners. Again, probably because they didn't have exposure to great relationships with their employers through their apprenticeship and, you know, their early years working in trades, or, you know, for the tradie wives, same thing. You know, any of us who have worked in corporate, there's not a hell of a lot of relationship going on there. Lots of our tradie wives are healthcare or former healthcare workers. That's a fairly thankless task at times. And so you use the R word of relationship. You know, a lot of people get stuck on remuneration as being the key, and they miss the other R, which is relationship. And if you can find ways through those systems that Nick is talking about, which you can actually proceduralize the building of a relationship with your employees, it's a beautiful thing. Where if you just follow the bouncing ball, you'll build a relationship with them, unless you're a complete tosser. But you know, we can fix that for people as well with a bit of an attitude adjustment.
Some people.
I have a hammer. It works kind of well.
So yeah,
I
love that, Jackson. On the same page.
So I think the other part to this, guys, is that most tradies run their business from touch, right? It's just they've been doing it for years, if not decades. They've been on the tools. They can basically do their job with their eyes closed. And there's this identity shift as they transition into being more of a manager and a leader in their business. And one of the biggest issues that results of them going back in that vicious cycle is feeling out of touch. Like it's like they lose the finger on the pulse. So what should ambitious tradie be looking at to keep that finger on the pulse as they shift that identity into being a technician from being a manager and a leader?
It's a really good question. I think it's a different answer for most business owners. Everyone's a little bit different on what works for them. We've got some clients that really need to get back on the tools once or twice a week just so they feel like they're still somewhat in control about what's going on. And then we have other tradies that have developed excellent systems using fantastic apps that are, again, free or very low cost, so that they are communicating really well with their team on the ground, including pictures and videos where they need it, to ensure that they feel like they've got control over that quality as well. I think that one of the biggest mistakes we see is typically trade business owners, or I think business owners as a whole, feel like when they step out of that role as the worker in the business and they become more of that business owner, they tend to take their hands right off and they stop looking at what's going on the ground day to day. And that's where mistakes are made. Quality drops. We don't have the productivity levels that we need to be pumping through that cash flow that we really need for our business to get the results that we need. And so we talk a lot about finding a system or finding a way that works with you and your team to ensure that you're able to monitor that ongoing. Some guys work really, really well on the ground all the time with tight targets and those regular catch-ups. So it's a bit of a dovetail into that HR system as well. And then others just don't. They really need somebody there pushing them and keeping them motivated. And for some business owners, that will mean dropping back to the tools or showing up and doing an inspection and checking on the quality a couple of times a week, or using apps and things to, again, leverage their time so they're not having to go to site, but they're getting the same information back. That's a great place to start as a way to, I guess, maintain that control over both. But I think you referenced it really well. It's a really big head shift into understanding what their new identity is. And we've had a huge amount of success. This sounds like such a mundane little job, and yet it creates big change in the way people thinking, and it's establishing position descriptions for everyone in the business, including the business owners. What are you now responsible for? What will your day-to-day tasks look like? It's a small shift. Seems like such a mundane thing to do, but it really creates that clarity for you as the business owner to understand what your new role is now. What are you responsible for? Who will you be leading? How will that leadership look? What will each day look like in periods of time? What are your obligations each week? It's a simple job, but it does help facilitate that big mental shift, I think, that needs to happen to step into that new role.
That's powerful, because I think that's the biggest problem, right? They've outsourced or they've handed off their old responsibilities, and they're like, okay, who am I now? What is my identity? How am I adding value? And I think it just, by having that role description, it gives you that clarity to know how do you fill that newfound time with other value add responsibilities. It gets you to grow that business, which is awesome.
Yeah, absolutely.
Fantastic. Great. So guys, if you were to look at the trade industry as a whole, who would be an ideal client for you? What are their symptoms, their frustrations, their current position that would kind of problems or goals that you help achieve every single day?
Righto, Nick's quiet. Looks like I'm jumping in.
Happy to take the steering wheel if I need.
I suppose when you look at, it's a bit of a two-part story. One, it's our ideal client because it's who we like to work with, and not surprisingly, they're the clients that probably get the greatest change and greatest results over the shortest period of time. They're usually a husband and wife team, or, they're a partnership, so a life partnership, not necessarily working full-time together in and on the business, but certainly there's some level of involvement from the supporting partner, whether that's the he or the her or whatever we're using these days. So partnership, working together, mostly it's a business that's got some runs on the board. So I suppose they've had a few learnings over, a few years, anything up to sort of 8-10 years. But it's a running business. They've got customers, they've got some financial flow in the business. It's not always the direction that they want it to be, but there's some runs on the board. And from there, I think the biggest thing for me, and I'd love for Nick to sort of flesh this out a bit more, for me, it's a headspace that they're in. One, at least, of the partnership has said, we got to change something. And the other one has usually said, okay, sure, what? It's that open question mark of, well, how? What? How do we change it? They've probably argued about it or had a huffing session about it. There's that little seed of, okay, maybe there's another way. We don't know what it is, but just maybe there's a different way to do this because we're not really happy with where we are right now. Or I feel like we could be so much better off than we are, or so much further in front, or we could be working less hours. And it's just that wondering, I wonder if. And the people that come to us in that state are generally open to feedback. They're open to new ideas. They're willing to have a crack and have a go at something different. And from there, they have a different level across clients, but they have a level of implementation. You talked about, I can't remember if you said ferocious execution or if that was a term you used, Jackson. It varies from ferocious execution to we're executing a bit, but there's some level of putting things in place. So, they're willing to actually have a go and put things in place. But as I said, I'd love for Nick to tidy that up and make that sound really good.
Put a bow on it for you. Yeah. I think essentially they need to be open to change. Change is one of the hardest things that we do as humans. It's something that we're really great at when we're children, but we're taught really quickly how not to change. I think many of the systems that we have in place socially within our country mean that we stop exploring change, I guess, and then it becomes really challenging. So change means having to work on yourself and some of your ideals, and maybe being open to shifting some of those so that you can implement and try some of the strategies that we talk about. So for me, if I were to really pull it together, put a bow on it for Warrick, I would be saying you need to be open to changing A, yourself, B, the way you think, and C, the way you're currently doing things. And if you're comfortable with giving that a try, and I promise sometimes it will be uncomfortable, but other times it will just really make sense. If you're open to that ideal, then you're the perfect client.
As business owners, we need to get comfortable being uncomfortable.
Absolutely.
And this is not just the old discomfort of just always pushing it to the line and always trying to find the money to make ends meet. No, this is getting comfortable doing the uncomfortable things that are going to help you overcome those issues, navigate those challenges, push past them, and build a better or more profitable business that actually allows you to build wealth. Guys like you that really help facilitate that and use the business as a vehicle for good. Because honestly, from what I know now, seeing trade businesses that have worked with business coaches like you guys, and through what we've done with a lot of our business trade clients as well, it's a phenomenal space to be in. There is such tremendous growth opportunity, tremendous cash creation opportunity. So really, if you're a trade business, you're blessed that as long as you're getting the right advice and mentorship to make the most of the opportunity that you've got available. I think that's the most critical part.
Absolutely.
I 100% agree. I don't think there's been a better time than now to make money as a trade business owner. I know that sounds counterproductive when we're dealing with some of those increases and the lack of materials, etc. we've been talking about, but when we put together a lot of the things we've spoken about today, creating solutions, having great teams, leveraging time, when we put those all in place, we can create these amazing wealth solutions that get them to where they want to be. They can have that lifestyle that they originally went into business for, like taking holidays or being there for the kids when they've got something special on at school, or shutting down for a month over Christmas instead of feeling that pressure and boom over the Christmas time. There's a huge opportunity, particularly for trade business owners at the moment.
Couldn't agree more. So guys, if anyone's listened or watched this and they love what you had to say and they want to get in touch, what's the best way for them to get in contact with you?
Probably the easiest place is our website. So all the dubs.tradiesinbusiness.com.au, and we're all over socials as Tradies in Business. You'll find all of our handles exactly the same across Facebook, the Gram, LinkedIn, and we don't bother with Twitter.
No one does except Donald Trump. So fantastic, guys. I'll include all the links in the show notes. Guys, just remember, a good idea in theory remains exactly that, just a good idea. If you've listened this far, there's obviously been something that struck a chord with you. So make sure that you take action and make sure that you reach out and have a chat. Waz and Nick, I appreciate you making the time. I know you're busy and I appreciate you sharing some value, and I look forward to catching up again soon.
Thanks, Jackson.
Thanks,
It was
Jackson.
great.
Absolute pleasure.
Thanks, guys.